The city of Eloria was alive with light and sound. Tall towers touched the skies, glowing with crystals that hummed softly. Streets were filled with traders, travelers, and voices speaking in many tongues. Yet in the middle of this noise, Commander Lyra walked alone, her silver armor catching the soft glow of the moons above. Her heart was heavy as she passed through the plaza of remembrance. Here, memories were carved in a stone. Statues of warriors stood tall, their names etched for all eternity. She stopped before one name, a name she could never forget: Ethan Ward, the human soldier who had once fought beside her and who had died in her arms 60 years ago. Lyra closed her eyes. The memory was as sharp as the day it happened. The battlefield had been burning, smoke thick in the air, her body broken and bleeding. And then Ethan had come, fighting through enemies to reach her. He had shielded her with his body, taking the blade meant for her heart. His last words had been soft, trembling, yet filled with strength. Live, Lyra. Then his life slipped away, and her tears had fallen upon his still face. 60 years had passed, and still she could not forget. Her kind lived longer than humans. But even among her people, 60 years was a lifetime. No human could survive it. No human could remain unchanged. Yet when she lifted her eyes that night, her world turned upside down. Through the crowd, she saw him. The same man, the same face, the same eyes. Ethan Ward. He walked as if nothing had happened, as if no time had touched him. He looked not a day older. Lyra froze where she stood, her breath caught in her throat, her hand tightened on her sword. It cannot be, she thought. Her heart raced faster. She moved through the crowd, pushing past voices, trying not to lose sight of him. Her mind screamed, "This is impossible." Ethan stopped at a market stall, smiling kindly at the merchant, his voice the same, warm and human. Lyra felt her chest ache. It was him, not a copy, not an illusion. Her soul recognized him. She stayed hidden, watching him, memories flooding her. But with every memory came questions. How could this be? Why is he here? Why is he not aged? The moons rose higher, and the city lights shimmered like stars. Ethan turned away from the stall, walking down a quiet street. Lyra followed, silent as a shadow. She was a commander, a warrior. Yet tonight, she felt like a trembling child chasing a ghost. Finally, he stopped near the edge of the plaza, alone, the sound of the crowd fading into silence. Lyra stepped forward, her voice shaking though she tried to steady it. "Ethan," she called. He turned, his eyes meeting hers, surprise flashing across his face, and then a smile. "Do I know you?" he asked softly, his tone gentle. Lyra's heart nearly broke. Her voice was low, trembling. "You died in my arms 60 years ago, human, yet you stand before me unchanged." Ethan's brow furrowed, confusion in his eyes. He laughed lightly, as if it were a strange joke. 60 years? That cannot be. I'm only 30, he said, shaking his head. Lyra stared at him, her breath cold in her chest. Every instinct told her this was no lie. He truly believed it. He had no memory of death, no memory of the war's end. Her hand shook as she whispered, "I saw you die. I felt your last breath. I held your broken body. How are you here? How do you look the same?" Ethan looked down at his hands, then back at her. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice carrying doubt, but also fear. Lyra took a step closer, her eyes locked on his. "You are Ethan Ward, the soldier from Earth, the man who saved me." Ethan swallowed hard, his voice firm but uncertain. "Yes, that's my name, Ethan Ward, but I don't remember you. I don't remember dying. I don't." His voice trailed off, lost in the confusion. The silence between them grew heavy. The moons glowed bright, casting silver light on their faces. Lyra's chest ached with old wounds and new pain. She wanted to reach out, to touch him, to believe he was real, but fear held her still. In the shadows behind them, unseen eyes watched, dark figures hidden among the alleys, their helmets glinting faintly under moonlight. Lyra felt a chill crawl down her spine. She sensed danger. Someone else knew Ethan was here. But Ethan seemed unaware, still staring at her with confusion. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked, his voice soft. Lyra's answer was almost a whisper, filled with sorrow and wonder. Because, Ethan, you should not exist. The night air grew colder, the city around them continued with life. But for Lyra and Ethan, time itself seemed to stop. The impossible truth stood before them. A man who had died 60 years ago now lived again, unchanged. And as Lyra gazed into his eyes, a storm of questions filled her heart, answers hidden in shadows, and a truth too great to understand. Lyra could not sleep that night. The sight of Ethan alive had torn her heart in two. She sat in her chamber, staring at the flames of a small fire. Every spark reminded her of the battlefield long ago. Every crackle sounded like his last breath. 60 years had passed, but the wound opened fresh again. She whispered his name softly. Ethan. The word trembled on her lips. Was it truly him, or a cruel trick played by fate? Her people believed the dead never returned. Yet here he was, standing in her city as if time had bent to his will. At dawn, she walked through the streets, her cloak hiding her face. She followed him from a distance. Ethan walked with a calm stride, buying bread, greeting strangers, laughing at the jokes of children. To anyone else, he was simply a man, but to her, he was the ghost of a memory. Every sound of his voice sent shivers through her. Every movement brought back the nights of war when his hands had shielded her. The world had changed since then. Empires had risen and fallen. But Ethan had not aged a day. She wanted to rush forward, to demand answers, but her instincts warned her he did not remember. His confusion was not a lie. If she revealed too much, it might break him. So she stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting, searching for truth in the way he lived. That evening, Ethan walked to the old ruins at the edge of the city, ruins of the Great War, where bones still rested under the stone. Lyra followed, her heart racing. He stood there for a long time, staring at the broken walls, his eyes distant. He placed his hand on the stone and whispered to himself, "Why do I feel like I've been here before?" The words drifted on the cold wind. Lyra's heart clenched. He felt it too, the echo of a memory buried deep inside him. She closed her eyes. The night of his death rose again. The battlefield fire, his broken body, her tears. She opened her eyes to find Ethan shaking his head as if fighting against something in his mind. "Why do these ruins feel familiar?" he muttered. "Why do I feel pain when I cannot remember the cause?" His voice cracked. His hand trembled on the stone. Lyra stepped back, afraid he might sense her. But his pain was clear. Something inside him was waking. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed from the shadows. Armored figures moved among the ruins, watching Ethan, their eyes glowing faintly through black helmets. Lyra's warrior instincts sharpened. She knew they were not simple travelers. They were hunters. She gripped the hilt of her blade, staying hidden. Ethan seemed unaware of the danger, lost in his thoughts. One of the figures whispered in a harsh metallic voice, "The subject has been found." Another answered, "He is stable, unchanged. Proceed with silence." Lyra's blood turned cold. Subject, unchanged. Their words confirmed her fear. Ethan was not here by chance. Someone had been watching him. Someone knew the secret of his return. She held her breath as the figures disappeared back into the shadows, not striking yet, but watching, waiting for the right moment. When Ethan finally turned to leave the ruins, his face pale with unease, Lyra followed once more, her thoughts burning. She had proof now. He was part of something larger, an experiment, a design beyond death. Yet her heart refused to see him as anything but the man who had once saved her, clone or ghost or human. He was Ethan, and she would not allow these hunters to take him. That night, back in her chamber, she pressed her hand against her face, tears sliding down. "Why are you here, Ethan?" she whispered. "Why do the stars return you to me when you should rest in peace?" But deep inside, a spark of hope grew. Maybe the universe had given her a second chance. Maybe the love that had been torn from her arms 60 years ago had returned for a reason. Still, whispers filled her mind. Whispers of war, whispers of science, whispers of secrets too dark to speak. Ethan was alive, but the shadows were already moving, and the storm that would follow had only just begun. Night had fallen again. The twin moons hung above the city, their silver lights spilling across the tall towers and silent streets. Lyra moved like a shadow, her cloak trailing behind her, her heart heavy with questions. She had followed Ethan for days now, but silence could not last forever. He walked along the quiet path outside the city walls, his steps slow, his eyes lifted to the stars. Lyra's breath caught as she watched him. The way he gazed at the sky was the same as long ago. Back in the war, when they would steal brief moments of peace, he would always look at the stars and tell her stories. She remembered one night when he had pointed out a cluster of stars and said, "That one reminds me of home." The memory struck her like a blade, because this man before her was the same, unchanged, alive when he should not be. Finally, she stepped forward, her voice firm though her heart trembled. "Ethan," she called. He turned, his eyes widening in recognition, though his face showed only confusion. "You again," he said softly. "Why are you following me?" Lyra stood tall, her silver eyes glowing in the moonlight. "Because you are not supposed to be here," she answered. "You died 60 years ago in my arms." Ethan's brow furrowed, his voice sharp with disbelief. "That is impossible. I am 30 years old. I never died. I never even met you before this week." Her voice shook, but she did not step back. "I remember your last breath, your blood upon my hands, your sacrifice. You gave your life to save mine." Ethan's face grew pale, his hands trembled. He shook his head quickly, as if trying to escape the weight of her words. No, that cannot be true. I don't remember any of that." Lyra's heart ached as she saw his fear. He was not lying. His soul carried confusion, not deceit, but her memories could not be false either. She had held him as life left him. She had mourned for him for 60 years. The silence grew thick between them. The wind carried the whispers of the night. Ethan looked away, his voice softer now. "Why do I feel like I know you? Why do I feel pain when you speak those words?" Lyra stepped closer, her hand trembling as it lifted toward him. "Because deep inside, your soul remembers, even if your mind does not." Ethan closed his eyes, and for a moment he saw flashes, the battlefield, flames, the sound of his own scream. Lyra's face filled with tears, then darkness. He staggered back, clutching his head. Lyra reached out, steadying him. "It's true, isn't it?" she whispered. "You feel it too." But before Ethan could answer, a sharp sound cut through the silence. Metallic boots against stone. Lyra's eyes narrowed. She turned and saw dark armored figures stepping out of the shadows, their weapons glinting under the moonlight. One of them spoke with a hollow voice. "Subject Ward, you must come with us." Ethan froze, confusion turning to fear. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking. Lyra drew her blade, her stance firm. "Stay behind me," she ordered, her warrior spirit burning to life. The figures moved closer, their leader raising a device that pulsed with strange energy. "Do not resist. The experiment must continue." Ethan's eyes darted to Lyra, desperate for answers. "Experiment? What are they talking about?" Lyra's voice was sharp, filled with anger. "It means you were never allowed to die. Ethan, someone has bound you to a secret you do not remember." The soldiers rushed forward, and steel clashed under the moons. Lyra's sword danced with fire, cutting through the night. She fought fiercely, her body moving with the memory of 1,000 battles. But these enemies were strong, their armor thick. Ethan watched in horror as she battled for him, flashes of memory striking him again, her face from long ago, her cry as he fell, the warmth of his own blood. He gasped, gripping his chest, his body trembling as fragments of truth awakened inside him. Lyra stood panting, her blade stained with sparks from broken armor. The last soldier retreated into the shadows, their voice echoing. "The subject cannot escape forever. We will return." The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan stepped closer, his face pale. "What am I?" he whispered. "Why do they call me subject? Why do you say I died?" Lyra lowered her blade, her eyes soft though her heart shook. "You are Ethan Ward, the man who saved me. But it seems your story did not end that night. Someone forced it to continue." Ethan stared at her, fear and wonder mixing in his gaze. "Then tell me everything," he said firmly. "Tell me what happened that night." Lyra took a deep breath, the stars above them shining like witnesses. She knew the truth would break them both, but silence was no longer possible. "Very well," she whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow and hope. "I will tell you how you died, and why you should not be standing here tonight." The wind carried her words into the endless sky, and the stars above seemed to tremble, as if the universe itself knew that their story was only beginning. The night after the battle, Lyra and Ethan hid in the abandoned chambers beneath the old citadel. The air smelled of dust and forgotten stone. Faint light from a crystal torch painted the walls with shadows. Ethan sat on a broken pillar, his hands trembling as he tried to understand what had happened. Lyra stood nearby, her blade resting against the wall, her silver eyes never leaving him. She could still see the terror on his face when the armored hunters had called him subject. Her heart ached, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Tell me the truth," Ethan whispered, his voice raw. "What are they? Why do they want me?" Lyra took a deep breath, her voice steady but low. "They are remnants of the old war, a hidden order that never ended the fight. They deal in secrets, forbidden science. They once searched for ways to cheat death itself." Ethan looked at his hands, the scars on his skin glowing faintly in the torchlight. "And I was part of it?" he asked, though the fear in his voice already held the answer. Lyra nodded slowly. "You gave your life for me on the battlefield. But the war was filled with shadows. There were whispers of a project, one that sought to capture the spirit of human bravery and preserve it beyond time. You were chosen, Ethan. Even in death, they could not let you rest." Ethan's chest rose and fell quickly. He shook his head. "But I'm just a soldier. I wasn't special." Lyra stepped closer, her voice sharp with emotion. "You were more than special, Ethan. You were the man who saved me when no one else dared. That is why they chose you. Not for your rank, but for your heart." Silence followed, heavy and painful. Ethan closed his eyes, flashes of memory striking him again. The battlefield, Lyra's tear-filled face, the sound of his last breath. He gasped, clutching his chest. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Easy, do not fight the memories. Let them return when they must." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "If I died, then what am I now? Am I a copy, a ghost?" Her voice trembled as she answered. "You're Ethan Ward, but you're also the key to a war that never truly ended." Before she could explain more, a sudden rumble shook the floor, dust falling from the ceiling. Lyra's hand flew to her blade. Her senses alert, Ethan stood quickly, his fear sharpening into instinct. A hidden door cracked open, and from the darkness stepped an old figure, his robes marked with the crest of the ancient order. His voice was deep, carrying authority. "You should not be here, Commander Lyra." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Elder Kale," she hissed, "I thought you vanished after the war." The elder's gaze shifted to Ethan, his face unreadable. And yet, here he stands, the human eternal, unchanged, untouched by time. Ethan flinched at the words, human eternal. The title felt like a chain tightening around his soul. Lyra raised her blade, her voice fierce. "He is not your subject. He is not your weapon." The elder raised a hand, calm but firm. "You do not understand, child. He is the proof that death can be broken. His existence is the secret that will change all wars, all empires." Ethan shook his head violently. "I don't want this. I never asked for this." Kale's eyes softened with something close to pity. "It does not matter what you want, Ethan. You were chosen long before you knew. The war for your soul never ended." Lyra stepped between them, her armor gleaming in the torchlight. "Then that war ends tonight. He is under my protection." The elder's face grew cold. He stepped back into the shadows, his voice echoing. "Protection will not last. Commander, others will come, stronger than the ones you faced. The secret cannot be hidden forever." The door closed behind him, leaving silence. Ethan's heart pounded, his breath quick and shallow. "Lyra, what if he's right? What if I'm nothing more than their weapon?" Lyra placed her hand on his cheek, her eyes burning with fire. "You are not a weapon, Ethan. You are a man, the man who saved me, the man who still stands before me. Whatever they made you into, your soul is still your own." Ethan's eyes glistened. He whispered softly, "Then why do I feel like I don't belong to this time?" Lyra pulled her cloak around him, leading him deeper into the tunnels, her voice a whisper, "Because the secret war has already begun, and you are at its heart." Above them, the city carried on with laughter and light, unaware that in the shadows, an ancient conflict had risen again, one that would decide not only Ethan's fate, but the fate of all who dared to defy death. The tunnels stretched deep beneath the city, silent halls carved from stone long before Lyra was born. Her torch cast long shadows across the walls. Ethan followed behind her, his steps heavy, every sound echoing like whispers of the dead. They had walked for hours, chasing fragments of maps, old soldier tales, and Lyra's own memories of secret places the war had hidden. She believed that somewhere below, the truth waited, a truth neither of them was ready to face. Ethan's voice finally broke the silence. "Lyra, what if I don't want to know?" His words trembled with fear. "What if I am not even real?" Lyra slowed her pace, turning to him, her eyes soft but unyielding. "Then I will face that truth with you. Whether you are human or something more, you are still Ethan to me." Her words gave him strength, but doubt still burned in his chest. He remembered the elder's words, "human eternal," a title that felt like a chain. He clenched his fists, determined to find answers. At last, they came to a vast door of black metal, its surface marked with strange symbols. Lyra pressed her hand against the cold steel, whispering, "This was sealed after the war." With a grinding roar, the door opened, revealing a chamber bathed in faint blue light. Rows upon rows of glass pods lined the walls. Inside them floated shapes, twisted, broken, some resembling humans, others half-formed, their faces locked in silent screams. Ethan staggered back, horror filling his eyes. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice breaking. Lyra's jaw tightened, her grip tightening on her blade. "This is the experiment," she said, her voice heavy with rage. "The Order tried to break death itself. They built copies, they forced life into shells, but none of them endured." Ethan moved closer to one pod, staring at a man's face pressed against the glass. The features looked almost like his own, but wrong, twisted, lifeless. He trembled. "They tried to make me." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "No, they tried to copy you, but you're different. You lived, you survived where all others failed." Ethan's chest tightened, his voice rose. "Then what am I? Am I the first success? Am I even the real Ethan?" Lyra looked at him fiercely. "You are real because you breathe, because you bleed, because you feel the man I remember, the man who saved me. He is here, standing before me." Ethan's eyes glistened, torn between despair and hope. He wanted to believe her, but the sight of the failed copies crushed him. Then, at the far end of the chamber, they saw a single pod glowing brighter than the rest. Etched across it was his name, Ethan Ward, the date of awakening carved below. Just 3 months ago. His knees nearly buckled. 3 months, but my memories, my life, they go back years, he whispered, shaking his head so they're false implanted. Lyra caught him before he could fall. "No, Ethan, not all memories are lies. The soul cannot be copied. Only you carry the truth of who you are." Ethan looked into her eyes, her words holding him steady against the storm in his mind. Suddenly, the chamber lights flared, and a cold voice echoed from hidden speakers. "So, you have found the truth." Ethan and Lyra spun, weapons ready. The voice continued. "The others failed, but you, Ethan Ward, you endured, not because of the experiment, but because of the bond you carried. Your sacrifice bound you to her. You will defy death itself." Lyra's heart pounded. The voice was not mechanical. It was human, filled with pride and madness. "Show yourself," she demanded. From a hidden passage stepped a figure in white robes, younger than Elder Kale, his eyes gleaming with obsession. "I am Dr. Malric, the last of the architects of Project Eternal," he said, spreading his arms, And you, Ethan, are my greatest creation. Ethan's rage boiled. I am not your creation, he shouted. I am a man. Malric only smiled. Are you? Or are you the shadow of a man who once lived? Do you not wonder why you have not aged, why you carry death inside you yet walk free? Lyra stepped between them, her voice like fire. He is not your weapon. He is not your subject. He is mine, and I will cut down anyone who dares to claim him. Malric's smile faded, his voice sharp. Then you both have chosen war. The chamber shook as alarms blared, pods shattering, failed copies collapsing to the floor. Ethan's breath quickened, his fear mixing with fury. Lyra gripped her sword, her body ready. Together, they stood in the heart of the hidden experiment, the truth revealed, the hunters closing in, and the storm of a secret war breaking open around them. The chamber shook as red alarms flashed across the walls. Shards of broken glass pods glittered on the ground. The failed copies of men and women lay still in silence. And at the center stood Ethan, trembling, his mind spiraling. Dr. Malric's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and filled with triumph. You were never meant to live an ordinary life. Ethan, you are proof that death can be broken. Ethan's fists clenched, his heart raced. Stop calling me that, he shouted. I am not your experiment. Malric only smiled, stepping closer, his white robes glowing in the red light. You think you are human, but you are something greater. You are the first and only success. Your body rejected decay. Your soul refused the end. 60 years ago you died, and yet here you stand, unchanged. Ethan staggered back, his breath short. Lyra caught his arm, her eyes steady. Do not listen to him, she whispered. You are Ethan Ward, nothing else. But Malric raised a hand, his tone low, almost tender. Ask yourself, Ethan, why do you remember pain that is not yours? Why do you feel battles you did not fight? Why do you know the touch of her tears when you should not remember dying? Ethan froze, his chest heavy. The memories flashed again. Lyra holding him as the battlefield burned, her voice screaming his name. The warmth of death. Then nothing. Then waking again, as if no time had passed, he gasped, falling to his knees. Malric's voice grew darker. You are not alive by chance. You are alive because you will refuse death. Your bond with her became the anchor. We only guided what already existed. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her blade raised. Enough of your lies, she shouted. He is not your weapon. He is not your creation. Malric's smile faded, his gaze hard. You cannot change truth. Commander, he is eternal because of me, and soon the galaxy will know. Imagine soldiers who never age, who never die, wars won before they even begin. Ethan lifted his head, his voice raw. I never asked for this. Malric's tone was cold now. You were chosen, Ethan, because you carried something rare, the power to live beyond death. Not because of your strength, but because of your heart. Your sacrifice bound you. Your love bound you. And now you belong to history itself. Lyra stepped forward, fury burning her chest. No, he belongs to himself. Not to you. Not to your order. Malric looked at her with contempt. And yet, without me, he would be nothing but dust. It was my design, my work, that gave him back to you. Ethan's voice broke, soft but filled with pain. Did you give me life, or did you steal it from me? Malric did not answer. His silence was enough. Ethan rose slowly, his body trembling but his gaze firm. He looked at Lyra, her eyes filled with tears. He whispered, if I am eternal, then what am I supposed to be, a man, a weapon, or a shadow? Lyra placed her hand on his chest, over his heart, her voice steady. You are Ethan Ward, the man I remember, the man I see before me now. No war, no experiment, no doctor can take that from you. Her words steadied him. The storm inside him slowed, his breath deepened, his fists unclenched. He nodded, though sorrow still burned in his soul. Malric's voice turned sharp again. You could deny me now, but the truth will follow you. The hunters will never stop. You are the key to a new age, whether you accept it or not. The chamber shook harder, walls cracking. Malric stepped back toward the shadows, his voice echoing as he vanished. Choose your side, Ethan, or others will choose it for you. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of shattered machines. Ethan sank down on the cold floor, his head in his hands. Lyra knelt beside him, wrapping her cloak around his shoulders. He whispered, his voice low and broken. "Why me, Lyra? Why could I not rest like other men?" She held him close, her own voice trembling. "Because fate is cruel, but also merciful. It gave me back the man I thought I had lost forever." Ethan lifted his head, staring into her eyes. "But for how long?" he asked. "How long before they take me away? How long before the truth destroys me?" Lyra brushed his cheek with her hand, her voice soft but unyielding. "Then we fight, Ethan, together. Until the stars themselves fade, we fight." The chamber lights flickered once more, then went dark, leaving only the glow of the torch. Ethan leaned against her, his heart torn between despair and hope. The truth had been revealed, but the battle for his soul had only just begun. The night sky burned with fire as the hunters returned, their black ships tearing through the clouds, beams of light scouring the ruins where Ethan and Lyra had taken shelter. The ground shook with each strike, dust and flame rising into the air. Ethan stood at the edge of the broken wall, his chest tight, his heart heavy. He could feel it inside him. The weight of the truth Malric had left behind. He was eternal, not by choice, but by design, yet Lyra's words still echoed in his mind. "You are Ethan Ward, not their weapon." Lyra stood beside him, her silver armor glowing under the firelight, her sword drawn, her eyes fierce. She looked at him not as a subject, not as an experiment, but as the man who once saved her life. The hunters descended, their armored boots striking the earth, their leader's voice cold and merciless. "Subject Ward, surrender now. You belong to the Order." Ethan's fists clenched, his voice rang out across the battlefield. "I belong to no one." The hunters surged forward, weapons raised. Lyra charged to meet them, her blade cutting arcs of silver through the smoke, sparks flying with every strike. Ethan moved beside her, his body filled with strange strength, the kind that came not from design, but from will. For the first time, he fought not as a soldier obeying orders, not as a ghost chasing memories, but as a man choosing his own path. Every strike of his fists, every desperate move carried one truth. "I am alive. I am real." The battle raged, fire and steel clashing under the stars. Lyra's armor bore scratches. Her breath came hard, yet she fought with the fury of one who had waited 60 years for this moment. Ethan shielded her more than once, his body taking blows that should have ended him. Yet he rose again, unbroken. The hunters began to falter, confusion spreading among them. They saw what should not be possible. A man who had died 60 years ago fighting again, stronger with every strike. Their leader shouted, "He cannot be allowed to live," and charged at Ethan with a blade burning with red energy. Ethan stood his ground, his memories flashing one last time. His sacrifice, his death, Lyra's tears, his awakening, Malric's words, Lyra's voice. In that instant he knew his answer. He was not eternal because of science. He was eternal because he refused to let go, because his soul had chosen to remain. The blade struck, but Ethan caught it in his hands, fire searing his flesh. Yet he did not fall. He shouted with every breath in his chest, "I am Ethan Ward. I am no weapon. I am no subject. I am a man." With a final surge of strength, he shattered the hunter's weapon and struck him down. Silence spread across the battlefield as the remaining hunters fell back, retreating into the shadows, their voices cold. "This is not the end. Subject, the war for you will never end." And then they were gone, leaving only ruin and smoke. Ethan collapsed to his knees, his body trembling. Lyra rushed to him, catching him in her arms just as she had 60 years ago. Her voice soft, filled with tears. "60 years ago you died in my arms, Ethan, and yet tonight you live again, not because of them, but because of who you are." Ethan looked up at her, his face pale, his voice weak but steady. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring, Lyra. Maybe they will keep coming. Maybe I will never grow old, but right now, I am here with you, and that is enough." She held him close, her silver eyes shimmering with both sorrow and hope. "Then we face tomorrow together, she whispered, beyond time itself. Above them, the stars shone brighter, as if the universe itself bore witness. Ethan Ward, the man who had died, now stood alive once more, no longer a weapon, no longer a ghost, but a man who had chosen to live. And though the hunters would return, though the secret war was far from over, in that moment, Ethan and Lyra knew that their story was not one of science or control, but of love and defiance. Beyond time, beyond death, their fight would continue together,